Hey everyone, it's Brandon from the Young Investors Podcast. Myself and Hamish are excited to bring you your weekly rundown of the latest business and investing news from around the world. A quick reminder before we get started that any advice provided by myself is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives, so consider whether it's right for you. Brandon Kolk is authorised to provide general financial product advice in Australia and is authorised representative 1305795 of Guideway Financial Services Proprietary Limited, AFSL 420367. Please see the description box for my financial services guide. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future investment returns, but with that said, let's get into another episode of the Young Investors Podcast. All right, guys, welcome back to yet another episode of the Young Investors Podcast. Hamish, what's going on?
What's going on? Not much. There's a lot going on for you. You've got a different background. You finally decided to move to Melbourne.
Yep, that is correct. I am here. I am in Melbourne. We made the trek down a few days ago. This is not going to be the regular setup, but the more fixed setup has not been built yet. I still need to get the soundproofing up. In fact, the soundproofing in here is still not very good. So apologies if for this episode the sound quality on my end is not the best. However, I'm here. I'm in Melbourne. We're not competing with that much lag. The airwaves have to travel a little bit less far, a little bit less distance. But yeah, how you going, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's gonna be it's gonna be a lot better to do these podcasts because you're right. Even when we do them still over the internet, there'll be much less lag, and we should also be able to do a lot more in-person episodes. So. Yeah, I'm actually really excited. And it's just before our 300th episode. What did we say we're up to now? 298, I believe. 298. So we are very close to 300 episodes, which is kind of crazy if you think about, once per week cadence and there's 52 weeks in the year. So we've been going for a very, very long time.
Many years.
Yeah, it's been quite the journey.
It has, yeah. We have been going for a very, very long time, but it's been fun. I've enjoyed doing it with you, mate. It's a good ride. Still enjoying doing the podcast every week, and hopefully you guys still enjoy listening to it. But yeah, with that said, Hamish, what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of Australian stories. The ACCC has finally brought a lawsuit against Coles and Woolworths over deceptive marketing, which we spoke a little bit about price gouging and Coles, their full year earnings, I think a couple of weeks ago. So this is kind of a nice complementary story to that. I'm also going to talk about, at the end of the podcast, we'll talk a little bit about the RBA's rate decision, which came out this week. And what have you got over in the States for us?
Yeah, I'm talking about interesting. There's an antitrust lawsuit going against Visa at the moment. Right. So I'll talk you through that because I have some thoughts on it. And where we'll start today is OpenAI. They've made a very big call, which many people maybe anticipated, maybe some didn't anticipate. So we'll talk about that.
Well, with that said, today's episode is brought to you by Seeking Alpha, your one-stop shop for stock analysis, market data, and news. Access expert analysis and news for thousands of stocks. View buy, hold, and sell ratings from members, Wall Street analysts, and Seeking Alpha's own algorithm. Screen for stocks using a variety of fundamental and technical analysis metrics. Access 10 years of financial data and company filings, and manage your portfolio by tracking your investments with price alerts so you never miss a buying opportunity again. Click the link in the episode description or head directly to seekingalpha.me/young investors to try Seeking Alpha free for 7 days. Take us through what's going on at OpenAI. What have they done?
OpenAI, yes. Well, they've made a call for the longest time. They've said OpenAI exists to benefit humanity. It's to make sure that humanity benefits from artificial intelligence and we don't get destroyed by it. Well, they've now changed that tune and they're trying to make OpenAI officially for profit, which, I don't mind. Like, I don't mind of course, we invest in companies that are for profit. The thing I find funny is that we probably could have seen this coming, especially as, Microsoft starts investing into OpenAI and they always, you could see it coming down the track where there was going to be a day where they say, do you know what? That for the good of humanity stuff, let's actually change that to let's make a lot of money.
Yeah. And it's also just very on brand because they're called OpenAI and the big joke is that their AI models are not open source. I think Zuckerberg talks, a lot about how like his models are kind of available for people to mess around with, but they're literally called OpenAI and their models are not open source, which I think is, so this is kind of, that's why it's a little bit funny is it's, they've completely pivoted away from, I guess what their kind of original purpose was.
Yeah, it's quite funny. I'll read you the article, Hamish. It says, OpenAI is discussing giving Chief Executive Officer Sam Altman a 7% equity stake in the company and restructuring to become a for-profit business. People familiar with the matter said, a major shift that would mark the first time Altman is granted ownership in the artificial intelligence startup. The company is considering becoming a public benefit corporation, tasked with turning a profit and also helping society, said the people who asked not to be identified because the information is private. The transition is still under discussion and a timeline has not yet been determined, one of the people said. In a statement, a spokesperson said OpenAI remains, quote, focused on building AI that benefits everyone, adding, quote, the non-profit is core to our mission and will continue to exist. Yeah, continue to exist, but in a much more minor way.
Yeah.
OpenAI was founded in 2015 as a non-profit research organization with the goal of building artificial intelligence that would be safe and beneficial to humanity. The company then created a for-profit subsidiary in 2019. If you remember that weird ownership structure where it's owned by the non-profit and then there's a subsidiary that is for-profit, they did that in order to help fund the high costs of the AI model development and has since drawn billions in outside investment from Microsoft and others. This month, Bloomberg reported that OpenAI is currently working to raise $6.5 billion at a $150 billion valuation, making it one of the most valuable startups in the world.
Right.
Wow. What do you think of that, Hamish?
Yeah, I don't think we don't really have any information about how much revenue they're producing, do we? I don't think I can't recall seeing even a single number about, I can't even recall how many subscribers they have on their platform or like paying subscribers. But
Bloomberg has noted that OpenAI doubles its annualized revenue to $3.4 billion. That was 13th of June 2024, but I'm not sure where that number is coming. I'm trying to read some, but yeah, I'm not sure.
But exactly. Yeah, I mean, 3 billion, 10 billion, 20 billion. I mean, still a $150 billion valuation is quite something, especially considering it's very, very likely that they're not profitable, given their seeking to raise more capital. I would guess that this change in structure is with the purpose of raising more capital, probably because they need it, because they're not profitable. And so, it'll be at least hopefully through this process, we might get more information about the financials of OpenAI, which will make it a little bit more interesting to kind of get a deeper look at this.
That would be cool. I'd like to see exactly what the financials of that company look like. It says here, in keeping with the company's non-profit origins, Altman had famously not taken equity, stressing that the company was meant to broadly benefit society and that he had enough money. Well, all right, mate, that's nice. But he has also occasionally said in interviews that he wished he'd taken equity so that people would stop asking him about it. Reuters earlier reported on the company's plan to restructure and give Altman equity for the first time. It says here, interestingly, OpenAI is mulling these changes against the backdrop of an exodus of senior managers. Mira Murati, their CTO, said on Wednesday that she is leaving, which is a surprise move that marks the latest high-profile departure from the startup. In the months after it suddenly fired and then rehired Altman last year, OpenAI has been in a state of flux, losing multiple managers and shifting the structure of some of its teams. Altman subsequently announced additional changes to OpenAI's management. In a memo to OpenAI he posted to X on Wednesday, he wrote that Chief Research Officer Bob McGrew is leaving, along with Barrett Zoff, a Vice President of Research who worked on products like ChatGPT. Altman also named 6 existing employees who will now directly report to him, some in new roles, including Matt Knight as Chief Information Security Officer. He said, quote, leadership changes are a natural part of companies, especially companies that grow so quickly and are so demanding, Altman wrote. He said, I obviously won't pretend it's natural for this one to be so abrupt, but we are not a normal company. So things are moving and shaking over at OpenAI, Hamish.
Yeah, I guess it isn't. It's probably not too surprising that a lot of management is leaving, given they have made such a big pivot from what kind of organization and their goals were to what they are now. You would imagine I don't think it would be surprising to suggest that there's some executives who were really in it for the idea of it being a non-profit and that sort of thing, and that mission has kind of completely changed, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. As you said, this will allow them to raise more capital. It'll allow them to invest more. And so for product innovation, you would probably say this is probably quite a good thing. But yeah, it is another big shift in the direction of the company and the direction of AI in general.
It's tricky because they kind of have to if they want to remain relevant, right? Because you're going to have all of these top talent, all the top talent in AI is obviously in incredibly high demand right now. So, I mean, if your company is capped being a non-profit, working for the benefit of humanity, not focusing much on making money, then, you're not going to make a lot of money. And in that case, probably a lot of your top talent will end up just getting poached, which will leave the company kind of not being able to, grow effectively, or, its products will eventually just get swarmed or overtaken by competitors that are working for a profit and also have the backing of, an Apple or a Google or, something like that. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? But it certainly is a departure of what they originally envisaged. And I think that's why Elon Musk, because he was a co-founder, I think, of OpenAI, but he is not, I don't think, associated with the company at all anymore. And I think that was similar reasoning, is that he saw that it was becoming something that he didn't want to be part of anymore, which is interesting. But yeah, Hamish, that's what's going on. That's what's going on with OpenAI. We shall see what comes of it. Yeah. Shall we move on and talk to me about the ACCC? I love a good ACCC news story.
Yeah, well, I can't remember the last time we covered a big not antitrust, but a big kind of consumer protection case in Australia. But it's a nice kind of follow-on from what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with Coles' full year earnings being reported, and of course this ongoing story about price gouging, because the news this week is that the ACCC is suing Coles and Woolworths, the grocery duopoly in Australia, over deceptive marketing. Each Coles and Woolworths will have their own federal lawsuit against the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC.
Wow. Interesting. It's actually happening.
Yeah, and so this is different from the commission that the government is doing, the inquiry that the government is doing into Coles and Woolworths. They might bring legislation into the supermarket space of their own, but the ACCC, which is obviously a part of the government, has brought these lawsuits, and the allegations are quite interesting. It was not exactly what I expected.
Right.
And so essentially the allegations are this. Both supermarkets offered certain products at their regular price for more than 6 months, then increased the price of those products by at least 15% for a relatively short period of time. and then lowered those prices and labeled them as price dropped at Woolworths or down at Coles. And essentially the ACCC is alleging that the display of price dropped or down tickets was misleading, as the price of the products was in fact higher or the same as the regular price previously offered. So
interesting.
They're essentially alleging that they had these products, a certain number of products, which we'll get into, at a certain price for a very long period of time. Then they raised them for a short period of time, and then they dropped them less than they raised them. And now saying this is a promotion, even though the price is higher than the regular price that was in place for a very long time.
Right. So had something for $5. Then they've put up the price to 10, and then they've reduced it to 8, and now they've said, look, you can get 20% off.
Pretty much, exactly. And the great thing is we actually have some examples of a couple of products. So they gave an example for a product at Woolworths and an example at Coles. So the example product at Woolworths was the family pack of Oreos, which was $3.50. Yeah, just an essential purchase. $3.50 for nearly 2 years. So it was $3.50 for nearly 2 years. It stayed that way. Then in November of 2022, they raised the price to $5 for 22 days. And then they dropped the price to $4.50 and marketed the product as discounted as a part of their promotional period. And Coles' example is pretty similar. So Coles did this with Strepsils 16-pack. It was $5.50 again for almost 2 years. Then in October of 2022, so around the same time, they increased it to $7 for 28 days and then lowered the price to $6. And then again had it as a part of their down, prices are down kind of promotion.
Sing it, Hamish.
What's that?
I said, sing it, Hamish. Yeah. You got to get you remember the song they used to have?
Oh, God. That's a horrible ad.
Down.
That's a horrible ad. Horrible.
It's so bad. So bad. Yeah. Oh, dear.
Yeah, and it was a lie. It's even worse. It was a lie.
Yeah.
So that's the practice that's being labelled as deceptive marketing. The ACCC says that Woolworths did this to 266 items and Coles did this to 245 items, including staples such as brands including Sprite, Colgate, and Maggi noodles.
Oh no, not the noodles, Hamish.
Yeah, not the noodles.
God damn. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we're all pretty aware that this is just marketing, right? This is kind of how marketing works. It's a tactic anywhere, raise the price and then drop it and say it's on a discount for a little while. And this happens around the world. I think the question is, I guess in the eyes of the ACCC, is whether doing this is actually legal or not.
Yes. Yeah, and the thing when it comes to the consumer protection laws in Australia is it's kind of similar to the antitrust stuff where we talk about monopolies. There's no really defined definitive law. It's really just how does the court see it? Is it deceptive? Does this deceive the average person? Is kind of how a lot of the wording in the legislation is kind of written. Like, what would the average consumer think, and how would they, what would they think, and would they be deceived by this? And so, it's very unclear how this will kind of play out because there is no definitive rule that says you can't raise prices and then drop them and say it's a discount. It's just whether it counts as what the ACCC is saying illusory discounts. And so the fines for this can be very significant. So the legislation provides fines up to $50 million per breach for this kind of for this kind of deception, which is a lot of money if you consider there are about 250 products being included in the lawsuit. And so potentially the fines could be very, very significant. And the chair of the ACCC, Gina Cass-Gottlieb, I believe is how you pronounce that, said she was seeking significant penalties as this was done during people grappling with the cost of living crisis. And so It sounds like the ACCC will be looking to apply some pretty significant penalties if the courts end up finding in their favour.
A lot of this doesn't catch me by surprise. I don't read this news story and I'm like, what?
How could they do that?
They're doing what? Because as I said before, I feel like this is just marketing. So I'm interested to hear, like, for example, another thing that I find interesting that doesn't get picked up on is fake urgency in sales, where, you'll go onto a website and it'll say, quick, you've only got 12 hours left or something to secure this price. But if you log back into the website in 2 days' time, you'll also get the same message. You've only got 12 more hours to lock in this price. So there's no urgency at all. That is like actually deceptive. They're not going to change the price in 12 hours. Yet, everybody just knows that that's how marketing works. Like they're doing that very deliberately to fake an urgency to make you go through with the sale. But that's also just marketing. Yes, it's deceptive for sure, but it is also just a marketing tactic. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, Hamish. Do you feel like this is deceptive, and do you think it's or do you think it just kind of falls in the broader category of, marketing will be marketing kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I think bringing up the kind of the fake timer is actually a good example, because to me that's very distinctly different from this, in that if the timer is not true, that is deception. There's an intent to deceive. And so I think that would very definitively, if you use fake timers for discounts and that they're not actually true, I would say that probably very clearly violates the legislation. Whereas in this case, I think the big question, and what will be interesting as we see more of this lawsuit, is whether there's actually any evidence that they did this intentionally to deceive customers. You might just look at the facts and say, oh, it's so obvious. Of course they did. Look at that. The price was one price. They raised it for a month and then they dropped it. Obviously, that was their intention, was to deceive customers. But I don't think the courts will see it that way. I think the courts will want to see more internal communication from these companies to see whether they did this as a strategy. This was their strategy, was to raise the prices and then drop them a little bit and then deceive customers into thinking they were discounted. Or it could genuinely be the case, and you might think this is ridiculous, but it could be the case that during this high inflation period, they raised a lot of prices, and then it just so happened that in the month after, they did their normal planned promotion with certain discounts, and that included discounting some items that they had just raised. You might say that's ridiculous, and I might agree with you, depending on the internal kind of communications we'll hopefully see more of. But that would be, I think that's a potential possibility, is that we just saw the kind of the colliding of two things at once, which is inflation caused them to raise their prices, and they also did a promotion kind of within the same vicinity, I guess.
We all know that sales, weekly sales are just a part of the grocery store experience, right? So it would be interesting to see, they said this occurred in 260 odd occasions, roughly, for both of the major grocers in Australia. It would be interesting to see out of that, how many items that they offer just went up in price, but were not, because I imagine most of the things that you could buy at the grocery store would probably have gone up in price. And then of that, 200 of those items were then, discounted in a sale. That could also, like you're saying, be a very real possibility, where pretty much everything in the store went up in price. And then as a part of their normal kind of rotational discounts, then they just discounted some items, and then it looked like they put it up from 5 to 10 and reduced it to 8 and called it a bargain kind of thing.
Exactly. So I think, I'm really intrigued to see, because obviously through this lawsuit, they'll go through their discovery phase where the ACCC will be able to request a significant amount of internal documents from Coles and Woolworths, emails and that sort of thing. So that'll be really interesting, because it's entirely possible that there's some emails going from executive to executive talking about doing this in a deceptive manner. and that would be very bad for both of these grocery stores if that was true. Coles did provide a response. They said, quote, Coles sought to strike an appropriate balance between managing the impact of cost price increases on retail prices and offering value to customers through the recommendation of promotional activity as soon as possible after the establishment of new non-promotional prices. So they're basically saying they were raising prices because of their costs went up, and then as quickly as possible after that, they wanted to run a promotion discounting some of those items. And so, that's their explanation. You can believe that or not if you want, but that's kind of their view on it. And Woolworths has not yet made a response to the suit. And so,
interesting, Hamish.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think this counts as price gouging? Is it deceptive? What's your kind of view on it?
I don't think it's necessarily price gouging, because we were looking at the Coles report, the financial data, not too long ago. And over the last year, they've raised their profits by like 2%.
Yeah.
So if they'd raised their profits by 20 to 30%, then maybe you say, well, where's this come from? For a grocery store. So I don't necessarily think they're price gouging. I think they definitely have raised prices, but I also think that inflation has occurred. So I think it's fair enough that they have raised prices, as everybody else has. I mean, that's kind of how inflation works. So I don't think it's price gouging. Is it deceptive? I mean, probably. Kind of reserve judgment until we see more of the response from Coles and Woolies, like you say. But yeah, my guess would be, yeah, it's deceptive, but it's deceptive in the way that a lot of marketing is slightly deceptive, So I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your take?
I was gonna say I think I'd probably agree that it's potentially deceptive, but it's like to what degree? Because you go to McDonald's and you look at the board and the burger that you ordered does not look like what's on the board. Is that deceptive? The McDonald's commercials, they're not actually showing you even a real burger. Like it's a glued, sprayed up, shined up burger.
Or like a used car salesman. Like, do you actually think the prices that are put on the stickers on the windows of those cars are actually the prices that they think the cars are worth and that they want to sell it to you for? No, of course that's going to be their starting point, which is outrageously high. And then you're going to feel great when the guy comes, oh, look, you're bugging me down. I'll give it to you. I won't do it for 15. I'll give it to you for 10. How does that sound? Oh, I'm basically losing money on this transaction, Like, of course there's that deception. It's just, it's just a part of the shtick, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess we'll see. This will be a long lawsuit. This will probably be multiple years, so I'm sure we'll have lots of tidbits to add to this story over the next 12 months or so.
Very interesting story, though. Hey, I'll talk to you about another lawsuit. From one lawsuit to another, US antitrust lawsuit accuses Visa of monopolizing the market for debit payments. Visa has been caught up. This is essentially what the story of a company has a moat and then they get sued for having a moat.
Yep.
But we'll talk about it a little bit more. So the US Department of Justice has filed an antitrust lawsuit accusing Visa of monopolizing the market for debit payments and using its dominant position to crush potential competitors. The civil complaint filed on Tuesday in Manhattan Federal Court alleged the company behind the US's biggest payments network, quote, insulates itself from competition, end quote, in the debit market by imposing a, quote, web of exclusionary agreements on merchants and banks that penalize customers whose transactions are routed through different networks. The quote here is, we allege that Visa has unlawfully amassed the power to extract fees that far exceed what it could charge in a competitive market, US Attorney General Merrick Garland said. Visa, you want to hear their response? They called the lawsuit meritless. It said there was, quote, an ever-expanding universe of companies offering new ways to pay for goods and services. And the DOJ case, quote, ignores the reality that Visa is just one of the many competitors in a debit space that is growing. So their argument is, I guess, similar to Apple with their App Store argument. There are multiple App Store options out there. But like Apple, Visa does hold a very large proportion of that market. It says here more than 60% of debit transactions in the US are completed on Visa's debit network, a dominant position that allows it to charge more than $7 billion in processing fees annually, the complaint said. Debit cards typically issued by banks allow users to draw funds directly from their checking accounts, and payments companies such as Visa facilitate that transfer. Quote, merchants and banks pass along those costs to customers, either by raising prices or reducing the quality or the service, Garland added. Quote, as a result, Visa's unlawful conduct affects not just the price of one thing, but the price of nearly everything. Visa is a, quote, financial network we do not see, but we cannot escape, said Doha Meki, the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General at the DOJ's Antitrust Division. So after what I've just told you, Hamish, do you think that Visa is just a really good business? Or do you think that they are unfairly squashing the competition?
Visa kind of touched on it, I think. It kind of depends on how you view the payments industry. Because if you're just looking at payment processing, then it's a duopoly. It's Visa and MasterCard. And because the nature of that business is basically a network effect between merchants, banks, and the payment processor, that market is basically on lock. No one can enter that market. And Visa and MasterCard know that that they don't really want to compete against each other on fees. They'd rather just keep their fees about the same and both take about half the market each. So in that respect, is Visa doing anything, amazing that warrants? What did you say they were charging $7 billion in fees, or I think they make something like a 30% return on capital. It's one of the best businesses I've seen, both Visa and MasterCard. Are they doing anything special? No, it's mostly a result of the fact that there is no competition. And there probably won't be between those businesses. But then I guess the question is, are we just looking at those businesses, or do we also include all of the other ways you can pay for things? Because there's things like Alipay and PayPal, and depending on whether you're buying physically or online, there's obviously different choices. But going through the Visa or MasterCard payment network isn't the only way you can pay for things. There are other ways. But generally, it's the only way you can pay for things from your bank, directly from bank to bank, where you have an institution like Visa actually authorizing the transaction, rather than in the PayPal case, you're transferring money basically into the bank of PayPal. Like, you're putting it into PayPal's balance sheet, and then the money just comes out of PayPal. And so, I don't know. It's a tricky one. I'm not sure. I don't really have an opinion on it.
I think these cases, if the Apple case with the App Store was kind of decided in Apple's favor, I can't see this one being any different. The reality, I think if the Apple case, what was Epic Games arguing? That Apple, they're the only way that you can kind of get apps on Apple devices, which is kind of true, but the DOJ was still just but you can still use other machines, and you can still use other app stores, and they kind of just threw it out, I think, in the end, didn't they?
Well, I think I'm actually not sure if they completely threw the case out. I can't really remember. I know that they had to make some changes. Apple was basically preventing apps from telling people that they could go and sign up outside of the App Store for their like a Spotify subscription, right? Apple was basically saying to developers, you can't even tell people that if you go and sign up to Spotify on the web, you'll avoid the 30% commission that Apple is taking. And that's wrong, they're not allowed to do that anymore. Although now they're kind of finding ways around that as well. But I can't remember the exact details of all of the complaints that Epic Games made against Apple, because there was a bunch of different claims, but
I do think there's this interesting there are multiple options out there. Sure, you can call it a duopoly or an oligopoly of Visa, MasterCard, American Express, but there's still options. And I feel like it's not completely anti-competitive. I don't know. I feel like this is kind of drifting towards targeting businesses with moats. I mean, a business if they abuse their competitive position, then fair enough. I don't like seeing abuses of a competitive position, like what Apple are doing. You can't even tell your, customers that there's a different way to pay. You must say that Apple's the only way. I understand that. Or the same with Google, putting their products first when you use Google search, because we own it. We can put our products, even if it's not the best product, we can put it before yours. That kind of stuff I get. But if you just have a good moat, then you've just got a good moat. Anyway, I'll read you this next bit of the article. Visa has built what it describes as, quote, an enormous moat around its business, both through its relationship with the banks that issue cards and the retailers that accept them. So it's a network effect. And that's what the DOJ said. The company stifled competition by co-opting potential rivals through partnerships that offered generous monetary incentives, or by threatening to impose punishing fees, the DOJ alleged. I feel like that's fair. That would be anti-competitive. For instance, the company regularly enters into contracts with merchants and banks that offer significant bulk discounts if they routed a certain volume of transactions over Visa's network, the prosecutors said. Yeah, that kind of makes more sense to me. If they're charging fees, like punishing fees or something like that, then I think that's anti-competitive. But even still, if they're just offering better prices for bulk volume, is that not just I don't know. It's tricky because that sounds to me like they're trying to undercut the competition. And if you're undercutting the competition, that means fundamentally there is competition on price, right?
Yeah. That to me, the not giving the bulk discounts, but actually no, yes it is giving the bulk discounts for routing certain volume. That to me is probably anti-competitive. Simply,
you reckon that is anti-competitive?
I think it is.
Okay.
Because Visa's then using their power to basically, they know that merchants have to accept Visa, and so if they're basically saying if you don't accept these other payment methods and reach a certain percentage of of payments processed by Visa, then you're going to get significant discounts. I'm not sure. To me that feels like I'm not sure. I think I'd have to think about it a little bit more. But it's
kind of like Costco offering the lowest prices because they do things in bulk, I think. Do you see what I'm saying? It's kind of just competing on price. And if you're competing on price, then that means you're in a competitive landscape.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I would say is that it's not as if the merchant can increase the percentage of the Visa transactions in any other way other than not offering the competing options.
That's true.
Right?
That's
they can't put a sign out the front and be like, I mean, I guess maybe they could offer prices at a discount to their customers if they pay with Visa. I guess they could do that to encourage more people to pay with Visa. But really what this is it's Visa saying, if you don't accept these competing card networks, if you don't let them into the market, then we'll give you significant discounts. And it might fall into a similar thing like, there's a kind of a famous case study of a big petrol station chain, like a Shell, and a local one opens up next door or has existed there. It's actually anti-competitive for the big Shell petrol station to drop their prices temporarily to kill the local one and then just to raise their prices again. You can't do that. You can't use the fact that you're very, very profitable and just drop prices dramatically, kill the new competition, and then raise prices again. That's an abuse of a competitive position. It's abuse of your size to do that temporarily. Now, if you permanently lower prices and you're just a better you have more scale and so you can charge less, that's fine. But if you do it temporarily, knowing you're burning cash, but eventually there will be no competition, then you can't do that. And so this could fall into that kind of category where they're temporarily maybe offering these discounts essentially to basically prevent any competition coming in, knowing that over the long term, they'll be able to not run these discounts because there won't be any competition. And so I think that would probably, I can see how you could make the argument for this being anti-competitive, but I also hear your argument as well. I can see that as well. It's the same as the consumer protection stuff we're talking about. It's about, there's no definitive rules really. It's kind of just what do we think based on the facts is, what do we think is appropriate and how businesses should act. So it's very interesting.
Let me read the rest of this because, this is quite interesting. The DOJ alleges the volume floors that the group set essentially force merchants to almost always choose Visa, even if rivals offered significantly lower prices on a per transaction basis. So that kind of speaks to more what you were talking about, Hamish. Quote, everybody is a friend and partner. Nobody is a competitor, said an unnamed former chief financial officer quoted in the complaint. Quote, the only issue is to figure out how to make it worth their while to partner with us. Yeah, that sounds like the classic, I'm going to abuse, we got to find a way to abuse our power to get you to sign up. Interestingly, Visa shares closed 5.5% lower on Tuesday after the news. So, Is it anti-competitive? Is it just good business? This one, I think, is quite interesting, quite grey. And you really can, as we've just kind of shown, you can argue this both ways, I think.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's interesting, from thinking about it also from a value investing perspective, because as you said, there's kind of this funny idea that if your moat gets too good, the government's going to come after you. But there is something to be said about the way businesses use their moats. A Costco has an incredible moat. But the way that they've maintained their moat is that they are genuinely offering much lower prices in bulk for a lot of goods. And so, that's not something you would say is anti-competitive if they suddenly took over the entire market. If they're just lowering prices for people and people shop there more, they're providing a better service and it's good for the customer.
And lowering prices, I guess, by definition, is competitive.
Exactly. But then, you have other moats where it's kind of like a switching cost moat, where it's really annoying to switch away from a product, like an Adobe Suite, for example. It's very annoying for a business that's trained all of their employees on Premiere and Photoshop or something to switch to a competing product. It's very expensive, very annoying to switch over. And so... that's a different kind of moat where, you could find a company like Adobe abusing that and just raising their prices. And you might not say it's antitrust, but I guess some moats give some businesses the temptation to kind of do things that are not good for the customer. And that's where these kind of lawsuits come about. Whereas there are other types of moats where they do have a moat, but it does seem like they've generated that moat by genuinely providing a better product or service consistently for customers. And in this case, I'm not sure which one it fits into. There's obviously benefits from having a very simple payments system where all the banks use two payment processes, all the merchants use two, all the customers use two. It's very simple. You never go into a shop and it's like, oh, damn, they don't take MasterCard. That never happens. And that's because it's a duopoly. You don't have to, carry 15 different cards if you don't want to, this one only accepts Alipay. Let me get out my Alipay wallet. It's very, it's very simple. And that is a benefit to customers. But I guess it comes down to what they're doing behind kind of closed doors, what kind of deals they're making and that sort of thing.
Yep, I think you summed that up quite well, Hamish. All right, that is enough about Visa. Over to you. Let's talk about some macroeconomics.
Yeah, this will just be a pretty short update. We spoke a little bit about the Australian economy grinding to a halt or continuing to be very slow last week, and that kind of came in anticipation of their rate decision, which came out this week. So the Reserve Bank of Australia has ignored significant political pressure and decided not to cut interest rates. The cash rate will remain at 4.35% for at least until the next meeting in 6 weeks' time. This is, of course, a very different policy direction than the US, which cut rates by 0.5% last week. The two big differences between the US and Australia, which is kind of giving us these two different policy actions, is Australia's inflation is still over 3%, whereas the US is now near 2%. The US rates, even after their rate cuts, are higher than Australia's. So the US is less inflation, and they're coming from a much higher position, so there's more room for them, I guess, to lower rates. And that gives us kind of the results that we've seen, or at least for now, the RBA has decided not to cut.
Did we stop too early, Hamish?
I guess
stopped a little bit short of the US, and our inflation is now higher. So something to be said for that, I think.
Well, that's the question, right? And nobody knows what will happen with inflation, whether it's going to come back or whether we need higher rates. No one really knows. We kind of thought, at least it was I kind of had the view that maybe Australia wouldn't have to raise them as much because of the variable mortgage situation we have in Australia, which is quite different to the US. So you would think that the rate increases would have more of an immediate impact. And in some respects, you could probably say it has. But yeah, we've still got a little bit stickier inflation than the US. The RBA's statement said, quote, "Inflation has fallen substantially since its peak in 2022, as higher interest rates have been working to bring aggregate demand and supply closer towards balance, but inflation in some ways is still some way above the midpoint of 2 to 3% target range." She said she isn't expecting inflation to fall back to 2.5% until 2026. And so clearly the RBA is very concerned that inflation will just kind of hover around 3.5%, 4%, which doesn't sound crazy, but it's when you compound that over a number of years, it really does start to add up. So it's important that we can get it down as low as possible before maybe there is an interest rate cut or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Fingers crossed. I want this inflation gone. I want to move on with my life, please.
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, is that all we've got for macroeconomic news stories of the week, Hamish?
Yep.
Surely there's another. Sweden. What's Sweden doing? What's Brazil? How? Keep going.
Yeah,
Let's keep talking. We've had too much macroeconomics. All right, that's it, guys. That is it. We are done for the day. Again, apologies about the setup. I'm not recording as I normally would, so it's going to be a bit echoey. It's not going to be the best experience for this podcast, but hopefully the boys back in the office can work their magic and make us sound brilliant as always. I mean, you're going to be fine. It's really just me that might sound a little bit off for this episode. But regardless, we'll be back to normal, back to perfect quality next week. But yeah, apart from that, guys, thanks very much for tuning in, as always. Very much appreciated. Please, like the video if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a review for the podcast, 5 stars, of course. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever, we really appreciate it. But apart from that, Hamish, let's go to the pub. See you.
Let's do it.
See you there in a few hours, mate. 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock.
Sounds
all right,
good.
Cool. We now live in the same place. How crazy is that?
Crazy. Yeah.
Oh, the shenanigans.
Oh boy.
So yeah, if you see me and Hamish just strolling around town, kicking the footy, having beers, doing all sorts of stuff, come and say hi.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, see you later, guys.
See you guys.